I have walked out on a pool deck and been like, excuse me. And it didn't go over very well, so I didn't do that again.
No. I would love to have seen that.
Excuse me.
Welcome to Fit2B Radio. Slip on your minimal sneakers, notch your headphones into your ears, tuck your smartphone into your pocket, and take us along for a walk while we talk. Or just grab a cup of your favorite drink and get on the floor and stretch a bit while we bring you all things fitness, core, and diastasis recti related.
You guys ready?
Yes.
Yep. All right.
Born ready.
Born ready. I love that.
I love your first one, though, when you're like, I wish I could just say all those things. I know. That is so bad.
Hey everybody, welcome to Fit2B Radio. My name is Chris Benke. I'm here with Beth Learn. She is the CEO and founder of Fit2B Studio. And we're also here with a very cool guest. Her name is Adriana Lozada. I said that right?
Lozada. Yes.
Lozada.
I know you figured the first name would be harder, but it's not. It's the last name that gets you.
I like it. It's a beautiful name. And we were just chatting before we got started recording, and you are an amazing person. You have an incredible podcast, Birthful Podcast. I encourage everybody to go look that up right away. You can find more information about it on the website as well. But you're also, you do, it's not just a podcast, you're also a doula for a long time. You do all sorts of services and offerings, and have a lot of information that you've got out there, and you've written a book that is pretty awesome in Spanish. And I would love to just hear from you a little bit about your background as we kind of kick this podcast off.
Yeah. So, my background is in communications. That's what I did before baby. I just have one, so not babies, but just the baby, who is no longer a baby. She's 13 in a month.
Wow.
Yeah, right?
They grow so fast. Oh,
now we're doing teenage stuff.
Oh.
So there's those two things that run parallel, the communications aspect. And then when I got pregnant, I dove deep into all the things maternity and became a doula and was doing sort of just that for a bit. And as my daughter grew, I spread my passion into more and more things. So the birth doula, postpartum education, sleep consultations. And then 3 years ago, I started the Birthful Podcast, where I get to talk. Mine's just audio, so no video, but where I get to talk with birth professionals on a weekly basis and pick their brain in whatever I feel like. Get my questions answered, which is such a luxury for me.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about, what makes sense as we're talking to you with all of your expertise and Fit2B on Fit2B Radio. And we kind of came across this thread of the physical demands of birth. And we talk a lot about birth on the Fit2B podcast and on our website and our blog and on Facebook. But a lot of times it's just hyper fitness centric because that's what we do. But you're tying in all of these different things with this kind of overall blanket of physical demands. And it's easy for everyone to go, well, yeah, of course, physical demands, that makes sense. Your birth, right? But what exactly do we mean by physical demands? Pre, during, post, all those things.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, the most interesting, like from my doula perspective and seeing so many births, what is interesting is that it is a very physically challenging experience.
Right.
But it doesn't require you necessarily to be physically strong. And I think that's a little of a disconnect because culturally we think fitness equals strong, equals chiseled muscles, equals ripped and just fit. That can actually be not so great during birth. So it's more about balance and tone. Okay. I have seen pushing stages where that baby just won't come out because that perineum's too tight. Right. So I think that is the first message I want to throw out there is that it requires physical endurance, and you've got to, for hours. You don't know how long it's going to be, but it's not like you're preparing for a marathon, although it can last longer than a marathon.
Right. Certainly longer than a marathon. Yeah. So Beth, how do you, so as we're talking about fitness and in this overall kind of idea of core strength, that's such a prevalent theme in all of our stuff, how does that tie in with what we're talking about?
Well, I could just sit back and listen to birth workers all day long, which is why I'm just hanging out all quiet, because I am just jealous of doulas and midwives. I think, in a different life, I would have been there catching babies. But the connection is so, so deep. And Adriana's already hit on such a valuable point, and that is that we equate strength with a faster birth or a better birth. And strength as the world defines it is very different than how birth defines strength. Birth requires a different type of endurance and, like she said, balance. Mm-hmm. And when there's imbalance in the core and in the pelvic floor, we run into all kinds of problems. And what we are finding in the fitness community and the crossover with the birth community is that intensive female athletes are dealing with too tight, hypertonic pelvic floors. They don't know how to relax. Relax is not in their vocabulary.
Right.
And they think that just because they can run a marathon or they can do CrossFit, that they're just going to go to the hospital and crank out a baby.
Right.
That is what I thought having my first child. And I did really have a textbook labor, but I also required an episiotomy because that baby was just, I couldn't yield. I couldn't yield myself to her coming out. And then my son, I tore pretty badly again because he came like a freight train. There was no time to yield with that one. Yeah. And a lot of women are having that same experience, and it is more prevalent in the fitness community. And there are studies to back that up. Yeah. If you go to like NCBI or those other, what are some of the other websites that have research studies? I can't think off the top of my head at the moment, but lots of studies on the hypertonic female athlete pelvic floor and the risks associated with birth and birth recovery. And so Adriana's approach of preparing for postpartum and having the support you need during birth and after, really, I had doula trained nurses, and I think I'd be an even hotter mess without those women that were at my side. I was fortunate to be in a hospital that provided something like that, because a lot of what they said to me was relax, and yield, and I just couldn't. Because I hadn't prepared for that.
Right. So I think it's interesting. I think at Fit2B we do spend a lot of time talking to women, a lot of our clients, about preparation for birth and pregnancy and all that. And Adriana, that's one of your specialties, is understanding that. So what's the right approach? And is there a right approach, or is it different?
So there is, as much as, birth is full of uncertainty and you can't really prepare for anything. Right, so preparing for flexibility is the one thing. And in terms of the physicality, if you can, like Beth was saying, that importance of relaxing, like the challenge is being able to relax and yield and let go into an intense sensation. So instead of, because there's another thing that's key here that can affect your birth is there's a attention, fear, pain cycle. So the more tense you are, the more pain you have, and the more fear that comes in makes you more tense and all of that. And it's really easy to get into that loop. So being able to step out of that loop and going into the contraction, I always say into that sensation with curiosity and sort of like explore the pain. We never really explore pain unless we do big athletic events in which we're like, it's even good pain, right?
Yeah.
So free-framing birth in that light of it can be a good pain because nothing's wrong. It's normal. It's the way your baby is being born.
Right.
So preparing for that intensity and making sure your muscles and your body and your pelvic floor is balanced. And you do that through good posture. You do that through, you can add some body work and chiropractic care and cranial sacral therapy, but doing exercises that support your pelvic floor in a toned way. So like there's the big debate about Kegels. Kegels tend to just tone, they strengthen, right? Strengthen, tighten, but there's no stretching to them. And because you don't get that, you're unbalanced. You're creating a tighter pelvic floor, which I have seen. I have seen that case of the episiotomy because the head's right there, and then just that, it's not releasing. It's
and that's why I love the term mula bandha, which it is essentially is a yoga term for that root lock, but it's also the release. And that's why I chose that term for Fit2B. A lot of people are like, oh, that's kind of a woo-woo, voodoo. What is this? And no, what it refers to though is getting people out of that mindset of constantly flex, squeeze the ketchup bottle. And it's more about lifting and then fully releasing and letting go. And nobody talked to me about that. I didn't launch Fit2B or come into this information for a full 3 years after I had my second child. Right. And it would have dramatically impacted my birth if I had known what I know now back then.
So you guys are talking about preparation, but I'm not totally sure. Are you talking about preparation like days before and, as birth is happening? Or are you talking about like, what should women be doing, weeks before, months before, that kind of preparation?
From the moment you're pregnant. From the instant you're pregnant. Because I don't look just at the physical part of it, at the fitness part of it, I look at all of it. It's a very holistic experience. So I kind of when I do my doula prenatals, that first one, which we do as soon as possible, is we talk about birth in a different light and how you can actually support the physiology. And I think that's the key. So you support the physiology physically, mentally, emotionally, chemically, and that everything you do in preparation for birth and while you're in it is to support that, not to support. And then the disconnect is the medical aspect of birth, which culturally, intrinsically, it's stuff that unfortunately does not support physiology. And what I mean by that is vaginal checks, heartbeat monitoring, determining what stage you're at. All of those things are good for the medical people, and you need to know that language because they're keeping an eye on you. Right. But in terms of what you need to do in physiology, you need to get out of your brain. You need to let your body do the birthing. You need to shut your mind so that hormones can flow, so that you can relax into it, so you can go to deeper brain states, brain waves.
That sounds like a lot of mental preparation.
But holistic too. So because I want you to physically balance your pelvic, so you've got, the basic part of birth is a baby in a certain position going through a pelvis in a certain position, held by ligaments that are in a certain. So if you got kinks there or babies like this, then that's going to create a challenge, regardless of what you do with your mind. So you look at that and do preparation in that term. And then you also do mindful practice can be so helpful. Whether it's meditation, guided visualization, a lot of shavasana, whatever it is you do. Yeah. It is another muscle you need to practice. Practice the letting go.
Yeah, because you end up in a really different plane of consciousness. Whether you get the epidural or not, it is, like you said, you have to get out of your brain and yet still stay connected. It really is a balance. That word keeps coming up. It's come up in other podcasts as well. And the more a woman can be prepared for anything and everything, the better. And we can't possibly prepare for everything though. So I know a lot of women feel like deer caught in the headlights and they just don't do anything. And they're just going to go into it and take whatever comes. And that can be a healthy mindset, but it can also set us up for a lot of things coming at us.
Could have been prevented.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's not preparation. Just go with the flow is not a birth plan.
Right.
Amen.
You need flexibility.
Yeah.
You need flexibility, but you also need to be an active participant in letting go And the other thing that I always tell my clients is, you're going to hit a wall. Expect it. Mm-hmm. Every birth hits a wall. So expect that you're going to go like, whoa, this is too much for me.
Yeah.
And then how are you going to get over that?
Uh-huh. And know that probably when you hit that wall, it's probably right around transition time. So you're probably almost done anyway. So that's what it was for me anyways.
Yeah.
As I had clients start asking me a few years ago, Beth, can you please put together a labor prep routine? And I was like, I'm not qualified for that. What? And I'm like, well, so then a couple doulas started chiming in and that was a blessing because they're like, well, Beth, you could do, okay, these are positions that a woman could end up in birth. Why can't she practice those? And what are the muscles involved? And how could she train and strengthen her body or, stretch her body around those positions? And that concept fascinated me. And that is how our labor prep routine came to be, which is where I invited my husband and I'm like, grab a partner, do your little dance, practice relaxing your hips, practice opening, practice leaning over a chair, practice relaxing, practice opening. We do some belly breaths, engage, release, visualize. And it's a simple, I think it's 11 minutes long, but just opening up their minds to the possibilities of you could be in any one of these positions at any point during your labor and delivery. Why not practice them just like you might in a really great birth class? I love, there's more and more childbirth classes happening where they actually are training women to not just be on their back with somebody behind them like Lamaze.
Right.
Well, and the thing is, movement is hugely important during birth. It's huge. So the more you can get into the idea of I'm going to move during birth and practice these positions so that you have some muscle memory and that your partner can go like, oh, this is okay. We're going to go like this. The less you use that bed, unless it's a really long labor. And then there's a question about resting smart also.
Yeah.
Resting smart. Yeah. Because otherwise you're going to just peter it out. So walking and all of those bigger movements are good for the early labor. Mm-hmm. And then if you go for a walk, then balance it with some lying down and cocooning into the couch or the bed. And then once you get into more active labor, the movement at what we do is I want you to stay hydrated, hugely important. And then I want you all to also go to the bathroom because urine is not compressible. And you need every little inch of space. Yeah. Getting up from where you were to go to the bathroom and then come back to a different position. There's your movement. There's your shift. There's your switch.
I remember my little sister when she had her girl. She asked me to be there, and then I was with her when she went to the hospital, and she didn't have a doula. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be your doula. I was actually pregnant with my son at the time. And I didn't know as much then as I knew now, but I did know that movement was crucial. I knew that. I called our other sister. I was like, you need to get over here because I need help. And she was struggling. And I was like, look, let's just go to the bathroom. And we made a train where she leaned on my shoulders. And then our other sister got behind her and put counter pressure on her hips. And we just kind of danced our way to the bathroom and helped her out. And then danced our way back. And man, by the time we got back, like all of a sudden her labor picked up and she had to march in place there by the side of the bed. And she was there then until she was ready to be on the bed to have her baby because she could no longer stand. And and that's when the baby came. But it was such a powerful transition moment. And I was really kind of working instinctively, but now like even just hearing what you just said and other things I've heard and learned from the birth community as we've built Fit2B and coordinated and networked with other doulas and physical therapists, it's like that is so crucial. Just those little transition movements, changing positions when things are stalling out.
Right.
But it takes strength. Right. In that moment, you're exhausted and it takes stamina.
Yeah, and that's why it's important for you to consider ahead of time that you're going to move. And it's also important for you to practice these movements like you mentioned before, because if you've never squatted, then squatting during birth is not going to work for you.
Right.
Just like if you've never done a deep meditation practice or some sort of hypnobirthing, then that's not going to work for you in labor. Like you do have to practice any of these things. But the more you practice it, the better it's going to be for your birth.
Yes.
You can't just show up and expect to do all these things that you've never done in regular life.
No, so you've got to consider pregnancy as early, super early labor.
I love that. That's a great concept. Well, and I in the athletic world, we call it sport specific training. You know, there's a time to cross train, but as you near your event, you better get real specific.
Right.
But like you said earlier, it's not so much that, okay, you know, you're going to squat and birth, so you do all the squats. That can actually backfire. I'm testimony to that. You know, I did a lot of squats in my second pregnancy because I had it in my head that squatting was the best place to give birth, and that I was going to give birth to my son in a supported squat. I was going to have an arm around my friend and an arm around my husband. And you know what? That did manifest, but that ended up not being a great place for me. And I'm pretty convinced now, looking back, that I built a little too much strength and tension, again, not knowing then what I know now. And that is why I tore the way I tore, because I was in too deep of a squat. I hadn't practiced really relaxing in that squat. I had just practiced squatting. I did a bunch of shallow air squats. And then for birth, I needed to be deeper. And my body was not ready for that deep grinding position.
Well, here's my question for you. While you were doing that deep squat, I'm assuming you were pushing. Were you pushing with insane intensity?
Yeah, because I had that fetal ejection reflex with him, where he didn't come and everything was stalled out. And then I went from a 6 to having him in a half an hour. And when he came, it was just like, I mean, I was the kid still comes like a freight train. He's 9 years old and he just takes over wherever he goes. Chris knows it. He knows.
That's true.
And so that position, I lost control there. And then it put so much pressure on the base of my perineum. And I remember thinking, I need to get out of this position. I need to get out, but I was basically bound there.
Well, here's the thing.
Stuck.
Right. And so there's that flexibility, and also having a team around you that can be aware of that. Like, especially when baby's head is crowning. Before baby's head crowns, it moves forward and back and does like this little cha-cha where things stretch and it goes back until it clears the pubic bone, and then the head stays there. It doesn't go back anymore. And then you get a burning sensation, which is called the ring of fire. And those perineum muscles are stretched to its max. That right then, you want to close the legs a little bit. And usually in directed pushing, they tell you, grab your knees and bring them up.
And that's what they were like holding. And I was like, but then there was no time anymore.
So, well, and he was coming so quick. I mean, if you tear, and then it repairs. Like,
yes, it does. And things have repaired just fine.
Just fine. Like, that's the thing. We shouldn't fear the tear as much. Plus, you don't quite feel it specifically. You're feeling all kinds of other things.
Oh, yeah.
But I've seen 10-pound babies be born without tears because just at that time, legs come in just a bit.
Oh, that's such a great tip. I have never heard that tip. And I'm a total birth junkie, but that's something that comes from the deep experience that you have.
So it sounds like, you know, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. With your clients, what are the most common misconceptions you're seeing people coming in initially before birth?
Yeah. So there's one thing that's a perfect segue that I wanted to talk about, because we're in this pushing stage. Pushing is the biggest misconception, that you actually have to push. Now, here's the difference. If we do understand physiology, and that's why I'm a huge believer of supporting physiology, and, you know, when you're doing a physiological process, which your body does tons of, you can control them to a certain extent. Like blinking, I'm not going to blink, but you can't not blink forever, or you can't not breathe forever. Your body's going to take over. So you're not going to be pregnant forever, right? Your baby's going to come out. Unless you're being really disturbed and not being able to go to that deep, you know, primal brain and having to think. But if you're supporting that initial of like, let me get out of the way and letting your body, birthing with your body doesn't care if you're 10 or if what stage you're at or what centimeter, what dilation. And your goal is not to get to 10 so I can push. No, your goal is to have a baby. So getting to 10 is just one step in the process. And if you look at physiology, the head is in the uterus, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cervix opens up, and that's like it opened the door. It's at 10, but the head is still in the uterus. And the pelvis is wider side to side in the inlet, wider front to back on the outlet. So the head tends to come in sideways because we're narrower here, longer this way. And somewhere in the middle, it needs to rotate so that it's this way. And then if you have a newborn, it's a great party trick. You hit them in the back of the neck, like a 1-week-old. Then it starts going away. And they go like this. They extend the head, because what happens is once they rotate the head, hopefully they're looking towards your back. There's a curve between the pubic bone and the coccyx. And to navigate that curve, the pubic bone hits baby in the back of the head, creating an extension of the neck so that baby can then come out. So in the beginning, they're like curled up in a little tight ball. And as they're coming out, they extend, and it goes from being like a C to an S. Now, the head, so when you get to 10, that head is still in the uterus. It's being held by the lower uterine segment. That uterus needs to keep pulling up and release the head. And once the head is released, it can easily rotate, come down, and then extend. If you start pushing when you're 10, and we're like, oh, when am I 10? When am I 10? I need to push. And your care provider's like, let me see if you're 10 so I can give you permission to push. And if you have a lip, let me get in there.
Insert eye roll.
Move it out of the way. So now you're 10, now you can push. Well, you shouldn't be pushing that, because that head is still being held, and the uterus and the baby are working in a perfect dance of forces to, you're not in there. If you start putting your abdominal pressure and I'm going to push, you're adding an external force that is grinding that baby's head into the lower pelvis before it's released from the uterus, and you are getting in the way. That head needs to rotate first.
And the crossover with diastasis, recti, and core issues is that if you have women who are pushing for too long and working against their own bodies, and they're bearing down, purple pushing for hours and hours because somebody's yelling at them to push, often what we hear and what we see in my side of things with diastasis awareness and recovery is that they'll say, well, I checked my diastasis. I only had like a 2 or a 3 going into labor, but then I pushed for 2 hours and I came out with a 6 or a 7. Wow. Because of all that intra-abdominal pressure and all that bearing down. Whereas if they had been allowed and encouraged to wait and to do natural pushing, and go with their body. Women that we hear from that have been allowed to birth physiologically like that, they're finishing their pregnancies with a 3, maybe a 4. It's a huge difference.
Huge. And they're also having less perineal tears, because once you're letting and you're really tuning into your body, you can instinctively, like if you just let baby do this thing and wait for the uterus to really come up, and the baby to rotate and extend, then what's going to happen is you're going to feel that, because a baby's head rotating.
Yeah. I felt it. I felt it with my son.
It's a big movement, but
it was weird.
If you're pushing,
it felt like a key.
Yeah.
It felt like a key, like, because he had been, they're like, oh, well, you're at a 2, a positive 2, and he's not engaging, and you've been in labor for 16 hours. And so they broke my water because my water hadn't ruptured yet. And then like 5 minutes later, I think I need an epidural. And they're like, I think
you're this your son? The one that came like a freight train?
Yes. And then I literally felt like him, like notching. It felt like notches. He was like, click, 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 boom. I mean, it was like everything took over. But that sensation of him turning inside of me and his head engaging was, because I didn't have any painkillers. It was just so distinct and awesome.
Yeah.
And painful, but yet I was like, okay, here we go. And they're like, don't push. And I'm like, too bad. So sad.
One of my favorite things in labor, so I tell clients, is because I used to hate the pushing stage, because it was that, now we got to 10, now we're at 4 hours pushing. And it's so hard. But now when we do this preparation and understanding that you don't need to push unless you get that. So pressure is different. Building of pressure, let pressure build. But if you have to question if you have to push or not, then you're not. It is like when you have to go to the bathroom and you're like a little uncomfortable. You go like, if I mean, I could go, and if I push, it's going to be, but it's not very satisfying. That versus when you're like, oh my God, I got to go to the bathroom because if I don't get there, it's going to it's coming. It's that kind of same sensation. You wait for that, like, oh my God, the baby's coming. And I love hearing moms say, feeling that head turn, you go, baby's right there. And you know that within half an hour, 15 minutes, half an hour
or less,
they have a baby. and then they didn't push, they didn't strain the muscles, they have less tears and less incontinence afterwards.
Yes,
to recoup from.
Yes, because like you said, they didn't strain, and the lack of strain and the working with the body and in terms of recovery and making a safe return to fitness. Yeah. Oh, I can't stress that enough.
So let's transition to that. So you have the baby and you followed this kind of approach and it went better. But that's not the end of the story, right?
No.
Now, so here's the I wish every mom, every pregnant person would understand that postpartum is a time for nourishment and recovery, because you have spent 9 months, like when we go down to deep physiology of yourself and survival, for 9 months, your body is been, unless you've been really good at your, keeping up with your sleep and keeping up with your nutrition and lessening stress and all these things, your body's been depleted. Right? You have, your blood volume went up by 50% to sustain. Your structure, your skeletal and soft tissue structures we've asked them to realign and shift and accommodate all these different pressures, along with throwing relaxin into it to make all the ligaments soft and easier to stretch, which can, if you overdo it, create more injuries that then you have to recoup from. So you have this whole 9 months and then this physical enormous event of shifting and stretching both of your identity and of your physicality that is birth. And I say that, birth needs to be the immense, crazy tectonic plate shift that it is, because you need a physical representation of what's going to happen with your identity of becoming a parent. You need the counterpart. It's that big. So once you're on the other side, you need to make up for that. And especially if you're breastfeeding, your body's still being asked.
Yeah. And now you're starting a whole new process. Yeah. And for the first 3 weeks, when baby is figuring out which way is up and down and which way is light and dark, and nobody is really sleeping. Right. It's a lot. And so women, I love when a client tells me, okay, I've had a postpartum doula and, she really encouraged me to rest and she brought meals and she lined up a meal train and my husband did this and my family, and I was allowed to be in bed and relax. But, what do I do about my core? And I know I'm not supposed to exercise, and where Fit2B comes in with that is it's really not about exercise in those early weeks. It's about breathing. Like you can do core breath work right away. And it's fascinating how just by tuning into their bellies right off the bat, they'll say, and nothing happened. Like I try to core breathe and nothing happened because everything's so stretched out. But within a few days, there's some changes that occur. And if they're doing those core breaths, the core and the pelvic floor will heal faster and respond faster. And that's not so that you can go run a marathon at 6 weeks. It's so that we can at least lay a foundation.
Right.
And then you're ready for more when you're ready for more.
Yeah, and the foundation is key. And it is as you say, do some breath work just to reconnect your body again. Discover this new body that's shifted and how to create those, trigger those neural pathways again now that there's not a baby stretching everything and your organs are not like up your throat and everything, right? That's what it feels like. It does. So everything you need to like go like, whoa, wait, let me check out this new topography and mentally connect with it. So breath work, fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
alignments,
not even walking for several weeks, like doing very little, just baby steps, and focusing on making those movements nourishing movements. But frankly, the priority is first, like it's all about nourishment, but it's first sleep, first nutrition, what you eat, and also mental nourishment, like nurturing relationships, nurturing self-care, nurturing all the things. So I have on my website, one of the free resources I have is a postpartum preparation plan. Because we are preparing to have a birth, but we don't prepare to have a baby. And that's another huge cultural shift. Like, how many times have you heard, I did all the books, I have the childbirth education class, I have the doula, I have the thing, I'm taking baby home, I have no idea what to do.
Yeah. Well, where I had my baby at the hospital, they came in with, I kid you not, a stack of papers like a half-inch thick about how to raise a child. Right after I'd had my child. And they were lecturing me. One lady was in there for 2 hours, this nurse, and I finally said, can I sleep? Yes, I need to sleep. And you're talking to me about screen time, no screen time before 2 years old? What on earth does this have to do with, can I just sleep? And she's like, I'm sorry. I mean, why are you throwing it? So it's like, at the moment I had my baby, now they're giving me this stack of paperwork on all the American Association of Pediatrics recommends. And I'm like, go away.
No, yeah, and that's it. And so you've got to do the preparation ahead of time, because once you have a baby and you're sleep deprived and you're getting up every 2 to 3 hours and the feeding is included in that 2 to 3 hours, and you're on for 24 hours a day, every day. And like babies don't understand the concept of night and day. They don't get like cyclical production of melatonin and cortisol and serotonin until 6 to 8 weeks. So for at the very least 6 to 8 weeks, you're on a 24-hour clock. That's no time to be learning. Ideally, you learn ahead of time, and then you're like figuring things out while you give yourself the space and your body the space to discover. Rest and recover and discover. That's like my 3. Rest, recover, and discover is what you should do during those first few weeks.
Yeah.
So we talk at Fit2B, we talk a lot about strength and how we tie it into things. And we've talked about strength on this podcast some. But I'd like to hear from you. How would you define, what would you consider a strong birth, a strong recovery? Because we've talked about strength today in a little bit different way than normal. How would you define those?
So I knew you were going to ask me that question because Beth sent some ahead of time. And I was like, we need to change the language, because what the word brings with it in our culture is going to leave you lopsided.
Right.
Because what you actually need during birth and postpartum is that balance. It's that, internal strength. And it's so challenging to let go. Like that requires a lot of strength to give control over to your body. Right. Especially since it's a body that you've been most likely have been judging all through your life, or that you feel it's let you down, or that you don't completely love and
completely trust.
Right. Or you don't completely trust, or you got there by, through infertility. So I think that's the strength of birth, the strength to realize that you need to let go. And that's it's a first great parenting lesson, because
there you go.
It's no longer your life, because you're in that we're forever a we instead of an I. What does that mean? What does that mean for you? So in terms of a recovery, I'd like to focus, instead of strong birth and strong recovery, balanced birth and a healthy recovery. Right. Yeah.
I like that.
That's really good.
It sounds like the reoccurring theme that I'm hearing over and over and over again is really about balance. It's about stepping back. It sounds like stepping back and kind of looking at the overall picture and having a balanced approach. It is very in line with the way that we do things at Fit2B. Beth is constantly talking about having the appropriate balance in the way that you're doing things. And the problem that I see that is, I think both of you as professionals face every day, is that the world projects this information that has nothing to do with balance. It's very one-sided to whatever the particular agenda is. It's very much all the way pendulum swing to one way, whatever the agenda is. And so because of that, I feel like what I see and what I'm hearing from you today is we're swimming upstream against that. We're fighting that kind of messaging constantly, and it's not productive in this situations that we're talking about with regards to birth, pre, during, post. It's just not productive. And, it's just, I really love the synergy between what you're talking about and kind of our focus. And I think it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Absolutely. And I find that, birth is a really, like, this experience of being pregnant and giving birth and becoming a parent is an amazing opportunity to connect with what it really means to be a human. Yeah. Right. And in that balance, right, and being a human is being balanced. And the thing is, culturally, like you were saying, we tend to have a very polarized view of things where it is, in the way our culture has developed, we tend to put positive attributes to things like strength and being organized and being on time and logic and all of these things. And I mean, I don't want to get into not in a binary of male female in terms of gender, because that's not it. It's about everybody has, as a human, we have a balance of what we attribute as a female energy and a male energy in all of us. Mm-hmm. And so this is the time where you got to nurse, you got to be motherly, you've got to, tap into your feelings and your intuition. And it's hard because we've been conditioned for so long that those are things that are like not desired stuff, right? There's you've got to fight so much inside your brain. Right. So I find that that's also the biggest hurdle that new parents face, is feeling completely out of their depths because they're in a space that is completely new and asking new things of them, and to live their lives in a new way with that flexibility and out of control and of surrendering and sacrifice, which are words that we're like, oh, and asking for help. Oh my God.
Humble words.
Yeah. Humbling words, asking for help, getting your village in place. Right. Like, this sounds like, even to me, when I was first pregnant, all of that sounded really like, it rubs me the wrong way. Right. Because it's not stuff that we wholeheartedly embrace. So I think that's the biggest hurdle.
Right. Well, in a world where young girls are oftentimes encouraged to really tap into that type A, break through the glass ceiling, keep up with the guys, almost to be boyish to succeed. It's interesting. We have another podcast we're going to be doing with a gal named Lisa Holland, who is launching a business that's all about the curvy hustle. And, the kind of the more feminine way to approach things. But just like you said, we all have both. And that is true. Women have testosterone, men have estrogen. We have both of those sets of hormones in us. And at different times of life, those hormones fluctuate. And pregnancy and birth is one of them, where you might have a really strong career-oriented woman who's had to really tap into more of her testosterone energy, more of that dominance to really succeed, or not. I feel like I've used a lot of both. And when it comes to balance in my life, it probably doesn't look like a lot of other successful female entrepreneurs. Becoming a mom really almost derailed me because of it was just such a different set of hormones and a different set of feelings and a different aspect of vulnerability and needing help and needing people. And I had not prepared for that. I really came into it thinking I could do it all on my own, that I didn't need help, that I had 10 nieces and nephews and I could do this parenting thing because I got kids. I was good with kids. And oh my gosh.
Yeah, I see it so often.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, I see it so often, moms saying that, they lost themselves. So that's tough. You need to prepare for that. You need to prepare, which is one of the reasons I created a postpartum preparation online course.
Yeah.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So my postpartum preparation online course, it's like 5 weeks and it's not just about baby care, because it's not. Like, I'm not going to teach you how to change a diaper. You'll have plenty of opportunities to learn
figure that out.
But it's more about connecting with your baby, figuring out the baby you got, and how does that match with the baby you had in your mind, and do you need to mourn that experience?
Mm-hmm. Ooh,
right? Yeah. Wow.
Because neither of my kids are the baby I thought I would get. Oh my goodness.
And then are you the mother you thought you were? And up to now, what's your new identity? Mom used to always be your mom, and now it's you. How do you integrate that with yourself without getting lost? Right? Integrate and not be replaced.
And is it ever too late to take that course? I mean, I know physically we say women are always postpartum, but mentally and the aspects of a course like that, I mean, would it benefit somebody like me even this far out?
You know what? I would love for you to try it and tell me what you think. It is very much focused on that 4th trimester.
Got it.
Of where your baby is at that time, where your reality is, that symbiotic, because your baby's inside you for 9 months and then baby comes out. But truthfully, you're still even more connected, and baby's always on you. And that's
for sure.
Overtouched, and there's so much to it. That's why it's 5 weeks. But also connection to your partner, if you have a partner, and then leading you to finish and create. It guides you through creating the postpartum plan. Yeah. So by the time you finish the course, you have all this knowledge that's going to boost your confidence, and it strengthens your flexibility, right? Like when we were talking about pregnancy, I talked about how to prepare for birth. Well, do all these things during pregnancy. Yeah. So how to prepare for postpartum, do all these things before baby arrives.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what that course is about. And I did it because I was so tired and sad of hearing moms say how lost they were and suffering postpartum depression and anxiety and all these things, because it hits you like a freight truck if you're not prepared.
Yeah.
Right.
So again, it comes back to what I'm hearing is it comes back to balance. It comes back to being prepared and kind of working through some of these things ahead of time, especially on that first birth, but every time really. It's just been a fantastic podcast, actually. I always learn so much on these topics. They're always kind of out of my zone. So I'm always learning a lot, and I like it, actually. This has been fantastic. So you have an e-course, you've got the podcast, you have all of these different pieces of information. Where should people go? Should they start with the podcast, or should they go to the website? What's the best way?
The podcast is so good. Y'all have to check out what episode was it with the plus size mama?
Yeah, the plus size. I made a note.
Because that was one that I totally geeked out on. I learned so much, dispelled so many myths about plus size pregnancy. Oh my gosh. I'm embarrassed at how much I didn't know before listening to that.
Right? No, It was great. So that was episode 63 with Jen McClellan on plus size birth. She's fabulous. And then I want to make sure people listen to episode 113, which is rethinking the pushing stage with Wapio. And it's what I was saying about pushing, but a whole hour of it and going deeper into that physiology. But the podcast, it's out every week. There's over 135 episodes more because it's been 3 years on a weekly basis.
Awesome.
And so start there. The tagline for that is talking to maternity pros to inform your intuition, because you are the expert of you, your baby, your reality. So we're just helping you out with that.
Yeah. I was a guest on there at one point. I don't know what episode it was.
I didn't look it up. I'm horrible.
I'm in there somewhere.
Yeah, you can Google it. So you can get the however you listen to podcasts, but if you go to birthful.com, you'll also see the show notes for each episode with links and helpful information. And then there's a shop, or I can't remember what it says, shop or buy or whatever. There you can go to the postpartum online course, the preparation course. It's called Thrive with Your Newborn. Good. And I also have a toolkit for birth partners with like all my knowledge of doula stuff.
Fantastic.
To help you out during the birth. Yeah.
Good.
That is fantastic.
Good.
So start with the podcast, but you can also go to the website and check that out. Tons of good resources there. I encourage you guys to really subscribe to her podcast because you've got guests on there.
I'm very picky and not just I've been on guests. I don't always subscribe.
Yeah. It's not,
I shouldn't say that because now people are going to be like, oh, well, see if we ever have you on again.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you did subscribe.
Yeah, I love your podcast.
So, if you are just tuning into this for the first time, you should subscribe to our podcast on our website, fit2b.us, FIT, the number 2, the letter B.us. You can also find all of the stuff we've talked about in this podcast, all of the links to everything. So if you can't find it by Googling it, just visit our website and look up this episode and you will find all the links in there as well. You should also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got tons of amazing free resources there. Please check them out. And this has been a really cool episode. I'm excited about it. And it's very cool. I've got 4 kids and I'm learning new stuff all the time. So I love it. Thank you so much for your time today, being our guest, and looking forward to connecting next time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Adriana. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much. That was tons of fun.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thanks.
Have a great day.